Hi guys, so today I'm going to show you how this little gadget works. It is the Solarmeter 6.5, which has the Ferguson Zone UV chart there. It is it's a precision instrument used to measure the UV outputs from the light sources that we use with our reptiles and amphibians. So, and obviously reptiles, they synthesize vitamin D3 from ultraviolet light. So therefore, these gadgets measure their output, and they can they can actually help prolong the lifespan of light bulbs, because normally the manufacturer will sort of give an outline as to when the bulbs expire, but sometimes they can last for a bit longer, and if we don't measure the UVB output and we end up chucking them, then obviously that's a waste, really. So with these gadgets, they can measure the UVB, which can then prolong the lifespan of a UVB source, such as this Pro T5 Shade Dweller. So they are expensive, but when you consider the time and effort put into making them to be so highly precise, and they're calibrated, so they are kind of high spec material to use, but they are worth having. And even though I've just got my one enclosure for the time being, if you have multiple enclosures, then these gadgets are definitely worth buying, because they will save you money in the long run, and it also saves energy as well and is better for the environment. So I would highly recommend getting one. So that is the Solarmeter 6.5. Now, for leopard geckos, they're crepuscular species, which basically means that they're mostly active during the twilight hours of the day, so like dawn and dusk. They can be nocturnal as well, but they are mostly active at dawn and dusk. So that's usually when they pop out from their hiding spots to bask, thermoregulate, and hunt and explore and whatnot. Mr. Jinx particularly, I've noticed his kind of habits and routines. When twilight arrives, so as soon as these lights go out, really, he will come out, and he will usually hang around this sort of rockery zone here for a bit. He may lay down for a bit to absorb some of the thermal energy, because the slate will it sort of acts as a kind of a heat convector. So he'll lay on the rock there for a while and to get his energy, and then he'll go off and explore. So leopard geckos, because of their crepuscular activity, they don't actually need a lot of UVB. Some people could argue, do they need UVB at all? But yes, they do, because at the end of the day, we're trying to replicate the wild as much as possible, and sunlight, and reptiles are ectothermic, so they get their energy from the sun, and they also synthesize vitamin D from the sun, just like us humans do. And the vitamin D comes from the UVB wavelength from the sun. But because leopard geckos don't require, because of their crepuscular activity, they're usually most active once the sun goes down, when there's obviously less UVB radiation. So they don't actually need, so in terms of keeping and husbandry, we don't have to provide so much UVB, but we do have to provide a little bit amount, just to make sure that we're providing those wavelengths of energy in our enclosures. But for crepuscular species and shade dweller species, for example, the Arcadia shade dweller protein 5-7% output is sufficient for species like a leopard gecko. And if you go onto the Arcadia website and go onto the lighting information tab, that will provide comprehensive information on lighting requirements for your particular species. So that's a handy device to use. Okay, so I'm just going to measure the UVB outputs in this enclosure. So if we go over to the woodland side, and it's a very simple device. You literally, so it's supplied with the batteries, but there is a full instruction manual supplied explaining how to kind of replace the batteries and how to use it. But you just literally push this little black button here so that it comes on. A good idea when you first get these is to go outside and just for comparison, just to measure the natural UV radiation from the sunlight, and then it's good to compare in the terrarium. So on this woodland side, because we've got a low UVB output bulb, because as I was saying before, crepuscular species, on this side the UVB output is actually pretty low. If perhaps you had UVB like for Ferguson levels 4 to 7, for example, then you may get a small little bit of UVB on the cool side as well. It depends on the species and what their requirements are. Obviously every reptile is different. So so in the woodland zone in this particular enclosure for a crepuscular species, the UVB output is 0, which is completely fine. If we go to the humid area, the UVB output is still 0, which is still totally fine. Then if we go closer to the UVB source, we can see a difference. So there we go, we've got 0, 0.1, 2, because we are closer to the UVB light. If we go to this area here, down at the bottom of the drylands, where it's directly under the UVB, it's 0.3/4. And then if we move further up, so that we're sort of directly under the UVB source, then that's where the reading significantly increases. Now, Mr. Jinx, when he comes out, he usually likes to bask on these sort of top ledges of the slate rockery. So in that section there, the UVB is 0. And we move along here, the UVB increases to 0, 0.4, which is the requirement for leopard geckos. So if we look at the Ferguson chart for reference, so if we look at this here, so it explains the zones. So we're looking at the top one, the green one, zone 1, crepuscular or shade dweller, thermal conformer species, crested geckos, leopard geckos. Suggested UVB gradient is 0 to 0.7, and that is what we're providing here. That is what the Solarmeter reading measured, so we can safely conclude that we're providing the correct UVB outputs in this enclosure, which is good to know, because then it makes sure that the leopard gecko is getting the sufficient vitamin D3 that he needs, and which can help prevent metabolic bone disease and other health problems. So there we are, guys. So that's just a simple kind of demonstration on how to what this gadget is and how to use it and why it's important in the reptile hobby. So I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you learned something from that, and do consider purchasing one, because although they are initially expensive, they will be worth it in the long run. And just as we're on that, Mr. Jinx has decided to pop his head out. And there he is. Okay, over and out, guys.